All right, Jesse on Fire, welcome back to the channel. All right, so this particular video, we're gonna talk about two things, all right? Three things. We're gonna talk about why fighters don't wanna fight once they've made a lot of money. We're gonna talk about whether letting Conor fight Mayweather was a mistake. And then we're gonna talk about why wrestling is not awesome to watch, okay? Like just why wrestling on its own is the most infuriating martial art to watch if it's not mixed with other things, okay? As a matter of fact, we're gonna start right there. So I was pretty harsh on Usman for sure after his performance against Masvidal. Let's just clear the air here. You know what? Before I do that, if you like the channel, subscribe and ring the bell. Join the fastest growing community in the MMA world because it's fun. It's a good time here. I promise. Ask anybody. So subscribe, ring the bell, comment, like, all those things. Anyway, so I was pretty harsh on Usman after his performance against George. Let's again clear the air. That is because I am a huge George Masvidal fan and I really wanted him to win, okay? Like, in reality, I have lots of respect for Kamaru Usman. I think he handled himself really, really well after the fight. Really well after the fight, actually. And, you know, I have respect for anybody who fights in the octagon. All of the people who fight in the octagon, regardless of whether they have huge personality flaws, which I'm not in Kamaru Usman. Again, I'm saying Kamaru, it's not directed towards him. I'm just saying, in general, the action of fighting in the octagon supersedes basically everything else to where I'm going to have respect for a guy, even if we have a personality conflict, right? But we certainly can talk about why wrestling as a base is super boring to watch, right? Okay, now let me also just set this up. Now, what made me think about this is a guy in the comments, and I would look this up. I apologize for not looking it up because it was a great comment. Said wrestling's not boring by itself. Example, Khabib, and I was like, perfect, exactly, like excellent point. And what that made me think about was this, okay? So what you're looking at in the octagon, mixed martial arts, you're looking at wrestling, karate, Muay Thai, boxing, jiu-jitsu, judo, right? All of those martial arts, okay? Now, what do all of those things have in common that wrestling does not have in common with it, okay? All of them have techniques that are meant to hurt people badly, right? Muay Thai, you're trying to kick a guy's head off, punch them in the face, you know, throw knees through their skull, okay? Karate, same thing. Boxing, same thing. Jiu-jitsu, you're trying to position your body to where you can choke them to death or break their limbs. Judo, same thing. Throws, submissions, etc. Wrestling, not same, okay? Wrestling's the one thing that's all about is about controlling your opponent, right? Holding them down, getting them, you know, putting them in positions that suck to be on the wrong side of, but there's no technique in there that is, okay, now hurt this person, right? Like hurt them. This is just, it's not part of the martial art. It's about controlling another opponent. And guys can be wrestlers and be very exciting because they get guys in positions where they can't defend themselves and then they smash their faces, right? Or they mix it with jiu-jitsu and they end up choking them or, you know, submitting them, etc. But guys who are exceptional at wrestling and are only okay at the other stuff, that's why they're so infuriating to watch, is because as a martial art, wrestling is not meant to really seriously hurt anyone. You know, and I'm not saying I'm not talking about it like UFC's a blood sport. But I mean, you know, obviously there's a component to it that is a blood sport. I mean, come on, right? We can be honest about what we're watching, right? So wrestling is an incredibly effective, martial art for all intents and purposes, but it doesn't have the techniques built into it that the others do, which make for exciting fights. It's that simple. It is literally that simple, right? Any of the things that you see that are exciting, I mean, aside from maybe like lifting a guy up and then, you know, dipping him, I mean, there's nothing that exciting about watching wrestling. It just is what it is. And I apologize to the wrestlers. I respect it immensely. Wrestlers are the toughest guys in the world. Like, they have the hardest training ever. But in terms of a viewer who's watching mixed martial arts, every other martial art is more fun to watch. Plain and simple. All right. So let's talk about fighters not wanting to fight once they make a bunch of money. Okay. So this seems to be an issue that the UFC is dealing with now because, you know, you have John Jones holding out because he can, right? He has enough money that he doesn't really need to fight. You got Conor Mcgregor, who since the Mayweather fight, which was in August of 2017, has fought twice, and one of them was in emergency mode because his brand was imploding after punching an old guy in the head, right? The Cowboy fight was this needs to happen right now, Dana, Proper 12 sales have gone down 80%. Okay, like I need to get in there. I need to reignite my brand. Aside from that, he fought once. And he fought against Khabib and he lost. Okay, so Conor's the biggest draw in the sport. So for Conor, fighting Mayweather was obviously a great thing. Okay, for the UFC, who had never allowed their fighters to do that kind of thing previously, and made this exception because it was going to be such a huge spectacle. I would be very interested if I was going to have a conversation with Dana and I only had an hour. Maybe one of the first things I would ask, actually no, I would ask him about building the business, but just about like recent decisions. One of the first things I would ask him is I'd be like, talk me through your guys' internal conversations about letting Conor fight Mayweather or not letting him fight Mayweather. What was that about? And how did that compare to other times that you guys had offers like that? Where, because obviously, boxers were they wanted to fight Randy Couture, they want, all that stuff. But why did you guys choose to do it? And then did it play out the way that you thought it would? Because Dana said, Conor may never fight again, going into the fight. I also am wondering if Conor really made $100 million, but because I think that boxers inflate their purses. I think it makes for good marketing. Like they said that Dave Chappelle got paid $60 million for some comedy special. How on earth? Maybe that's true. I don't know, but it seems like a good way to bring eyeballs to to an event. Oh, this guy made what? Each of them are making $30 million. That looks like something someone's going to read, right? There's a million tricks. Anytime, like anything that brings eyeballs to the device, I always look through. I'm like, maybe that's not true. Maybe the goal is just to bring the eyeballs. But yeah, I would be very curious to hear what the internal decision-making process was. I would imagine it probably was they ran 1 million models. They saw what the attention on that was going to be. They cross-referenced the attention to the number of people who were looking who were not UFC fans. And then they did some huge metric, breakdown of how many expected new fans they would get, new UFC fans they would get, if they put that event on and Conor didn't humiliate himself, right? So then they're like, okay, is Conor going to be able to actually put up a fight? And that's an easy one to know. Mayweather's not going to knock Conor out in the first, second round. So let's do this. Let's make the calculated risk. It has to have been that. New eyeballs versus future value of Conor McGregor if he doesn't fight anymore. Because, you can always build out models to gauge a person's lifetime value. That's what these fighters are. They're assets, and like any other business, you're going to build out a lifetime value model for them. That's why, again, like when Dana's talking about Paige Van Zandt, he's like, yeah, she should definitely go test free agency. That's because he knows exactly what she's worth. He knows exactly what she's worth. He knows exactly what every fighter's worth. And so when he's out in the press conferences and he's talking about, when he said the thing about Curtis Blade, Curtis Blade's complaining about money when he's been inconsistent and been, had injuries. Okay, he's not like speculating on what the impact of those things are on a person's value. Like they are modeling that stuff out constantly. Now, a person's lifetime value is going to adjust based on how much they fight, what the outcomes of those fights are. Like, what do you think the lifetime value of Jorge Masvidal in 2017 is the same as it is in 2020? Obviously not. So, the value, the current lifetime value of your fighters, which are your assets, is constantly fluctuating. But Dana knows better than anybody what impacts those metrics, right? And so if he's saying he's inconsistent and he's had injuries and then he has lackluster performances, he knows exactly what that means. That means your lifetime value is either staying the same or is going down, right? So with the Conor McGregor model, I would imagine it was a much more complicated model because now you're not just factoring in what he brings into UFC. You have to factor in what he would have brought into UFC with one of the most unpredictable guys. He keeps making predictions of things he's going to do that no one thinks he can do, and then he does them. And so you almost have this magic factor. You're like, all right, so here's the model that we came up with. Here's the machine learning, inputs that we made to build the model. And then we factor in the magic factor. Like, let's say that he did blah, blah, blah. And so let's say he went to 170 and won the belt. Okay. But we think that he's at critical mass in MMA. He can't get any bigger. He's going to sell as many pay-per-views as he's going to sell in MMA regardless. So here's what we believe will be the impact on the business overall if we go do Mayweather. And look, it brings up the lifetime value of every other fighter in our entire arsenal if we are able to capture an additional 600,000 fans, right? 600,000 people who actively pay attention to UFC. If we can make that happen from this fight, then the lifetime value of every other fighter goes up. And so it outweighs what Conor's worth. I mean, it has to be something like that. But I'd be curious to have that conversation and validate whether or not, I was correct. So the next thing I was going to say is was letting Conor fight a mistake. And as I just talked that through, there's no way for me to even answer that because I need to see the models, right? I need to see what the models were, and then I need to see what the impact was. How many new? Because obviously I was already a fanatical fan, so I can't gauge it on my own. On my own kind of, I didn't even know who Conor was. And then I came over. I will say this actually, as I'm saying this, is it just as like a sample, it's very, 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 very clear that the majority of Habib fans do not know anything about Conor's career, okay? Which means to me that they are likely newer fans who maybe came over because they heard about Mayweather McGregor. Then they started paying attention, and that's right when Habib kind of, rose up and they're paying attention to Conor, and then Conor throws a dolly through the bus and they're like, who's this Habib guy? And they're like, oh my gosh, like, wait, he's a wrestler from Dagestan. He's Muslim too. Like, anybody who's Muslim or wrestling background or whatever, or doesn't like Conor, if you don't like Conor, or you're Muslim, or you're a wrestler, and then you see Conor throw the dolly through the window, and then you're like, who is he throwing that at? And then you start looking, you're like, oh my gosh, who is this guy? He's undefeated. He's never lost. And then you watch him win the title the next day. I mean, maybe you watch it, but then you watch Conor fight him and you see all the antics. You get to watch Conor, and the more you hate Conor, the more you like Khabib. And then Khabib smashes his head in, and then now you're a fanatical UFC fan, and Khabib is your favorite fighter. Okay, so gauging the fact that from what I see online and the way that people talk about Conor, who are Khabib fans, that's clearly you're a fanatical Khabib, but you definitely don't know anything about Conor from what the things that you say. Like the things you say, you do not know what you're talking about. Like, it's plain and simple. You don't know what you're talking about. And I'm not blaming anyone. I'm just saying that the fact that there are so many of them would indicate that the Mayweather-McGregor fight was a success, right? And I can guarantee you that like I said, dude, I think the best when I'm talking. So you guys just watched me talk through my thought process of saying that I think Mayweather and McGregor brought in a tremendous number of new fans because of the number of Khabib fans who don't know anything about Conor's career. And I just tracked how that probably happened. Okay, so you just watched me think out loud of how I got there, that the impact was probably astronomical, and probably was worth it. So that's what I got. If you like the content, subscribe and ring the bell, because this is what I do, okay? I would challenge you guys to show me someone who has put up a similar video to this where, because honestly, I would love to see it. I would love to watch that person. I don't know anybody that is doing content like this. So anyway, comment, like the content, or like the video, subscribe, ring the bell, etc. Love you guys. Peace.